Well, super cool. Thanks guys for hopping in today. I just as a way of why are we doing this? The other week, the inspiration for me for this, we had a webinar with Andy Rozier, and I was like, man, I love that we were all together as worship leaders, even together virtually. But I love that we could do that, and that didn't give us much opportunity to interact. I'm hoping that this will give us some more opportunities to interact. But I just thought, man, more than anything right now, we need connectedness. We need to feel like we're not alone. We need to just be talking to each other. And we've as Adlib, we've always facilitated those kinds of gatherings. Try to get worship leaders together to know each other. So that's kind of the COVID version of doing that. And in terms of our format for today, my idea is that we'll have some time discussing a topic that I'll reveal in a second, and then we'll do some problem solving. Maybe if one of you guys has a problem that you want us to help you solve, just whatever's kind of like in the forefront of your mind, like, oh man, well, here's the situation. What should I do? Like, we can talk about that together. And then anything else, we'll have a little section for like an off-topic thing, like anything you want to talk about, we can talk about. Because the reality, even though we'll be focused on something about worship ministry, because that's how we're connected because of that. So that'll be the main focus. But we're also humans, and we just need places with people who understand our world to talk about anything in our world. Because even though like guys tend to be more compartmentalized than girls do generally, everything that is happening right now is affecting all of us. So anything that'll be in our off-topic section. So that's kind of the general framework. But for now, we'll start with and just so you know, I'm a coach. James is a coach in the white T-shirt with the V-neck. Tony in the studio is our audio coach. And then Kevin in the car is our fourth coach that's with us today. So we get together every week and we talk, and we love to, wood shop on stuff. When we're coaching a church, we always interact, and we always are helping each other see things from different perspectives. And so part of the thing that we like to model when we're working with the church is seeing worship ministry holistically. So we each are, have different strengths and serve in different roles when we're coaching, but it all fits together. So the topic we're going to cover today is very much that way, and the topic is simply, and I'm sure you guys have never faced this, but how to deal with troubling sound people, or when your sound guy is like not like on your team. I know that's a very uncommon thing. Just kidding. But I think it's going to be helpful for us to talk about it from a couple of different directions, because Tony is most often the one behind the soundboard or training somebody who's behind the soundboard mixing. But a lot of times he's also in front playing music. So the same is true for all of us. So which one of you coaches want to go first? First thought on how to deal with, what's the first thing you think about when dealing with a troubled sound guy, somebody who's just not seeming to work well?
To keep it general to start, I feel like I would handle this the same way we approach kind of every relationship, or at least I try to look at something as what's their story. Chances are it didn't start out that way. End up, especially if I'm joining a group that I haven't been around before, but they have a history. What's his story? Why does he, feel the way he does? Why does he or she? Why do they not feel included in the group, or what is it? And so, if there's a truth in the middle of how we all need to act, kind of understanding where everybody's at first helps bring to that kind of middle point.
Love that. Yeah, I think my go-to, because of how I failed at doing this. I want to know what was the last time. This is a question for Kevin. What was the last time? What was the last thing you ate when you guys ate together? That meaning working relationships fail because the relationship doesn't exist enough to support a working relationship. And you have to have a relationship to have a working relationship. So you got to get to know each other, both of you. So
yeah, you have to help me with that one, because I'm having a hard time even wanting to have coffee with my sound guy. So what do I do about that?
Pray.
Well, Kevin, you and I were working on a project when we coined the term of it doesn't matter what the reality is in the beginning, but it's someone's perspective is their reality. So helping kind of break that down and understanding that before we can get to what's really going on.
yeah, I mean, and if you unpack that for a second, somebody's perspective is a reality. In other words, their perspective might be inaccurate, but it doesn't matter because it's all they can see. If they feel like it's cold outside, it's cold outside. You have to deal with them. You have to relate to them from their perspective that it's cold outside, that's where they're at. That's what they're thinking. So, Tony, what's your first thought from behind the desk?
I have, this won't surprise you, but I have 100 thoughts. trying to pick the one most relevant. But a couple things, even in reference to like what Kevin was talking about, generally speaking, technical people tend to be analytical. So sometimes they get caught in analyzing what they think the problem is. And if they can, I'm not saying that tech people are like dogs, but if they can smell fear or distrust, or somebody doesn't even want to hang out with them, it probably is going to make things a little more challenging. They might be locked in that analytical, like, what's his problem and why doesn't he like me? And maybe not. The other thing that I think to dive deep into the pool right off the bat is the first thing we need to admit is that there are some problems that we have that are technical in nature, and there's some problems that are pastoral in nature. So it's important that you determine the problem with your sound personnel. Is it of a technical nature or is it of a pastoral nature? Is it something that needs an outside perspective, or is it just a simple, we're trying to solve the problem and we're coming at it from two different directions? So that might widen the playing field, or that, but those are the first two things out of the 100.
Yeah. Well, and Kevin, Kevin, sorry, I looked at Kevin and I wanted to say, Tony, I want to know where your head is at right now, because just as we were trying to get on this call, you were having all sorts of trouble, tech trouble, getting on, and you were a little bit lit. You were a little bit rocked in your heart, in your mind.
Yeah.
So talk to us about that for a second. What was that like? What was going on, and what were you feeling?
That's excellent. I'm glad you brought that up. So just to give you a quick overview, because of COVID, I've had to move my studio back home, and then now I'm in the process of slowly moving it back to the studio. So that involves connecting things, disconnecting, having this cable, this widget, all that stuff. So for probably the past 2 hours before this, I've been trying to get set up to get my camera set up and my microphone. And I was having technical problems where something wasn't communicating. And I can't solve it. So when you're a technical person and analytical, I tend to be kind of like a bulldog. Like I am not going to stop until I solve this problem, right? So for us to, we were scheduled to be on the call at 2:45 to prepare and get ready for everybody. And at 2:47, I'm getting my backup plan and trying to get my iPad because I had to give in, right? And I did not like that, giving in and quitting and not being able to solve the problem, especially since I'm coming on as the tech guy. So there's that, there's that pressure of people are expecting me to know what's happening, and I'm just as clueless as everybody else. And that happens in real life. And if you're again, going back to most technical people tend to be analytical, and they tend to be internal. They tend to internalize stuff. They don't always communicate clearly. And because they're like, listen, I can't even think about what the problem is in my head. There's no way I can communicate it to you when you don't even understand technical stuff, right? So they lock up instead of,
and they grunt.
Take a deep breath, right? They just say, just don't bother me, Yeah, they grunt. So that's a perfect example of where we came. And, since I'm not normally as flustered, the guys were, ribbing me a little, and I had to say, listen, you need to give me some time for the temperature to go from 110 to 98, and they were gracious enough to do that. But we have the relationship where we can say that, and they know if I'm saying I need time to cool down, they're like, oh, okay, maybe we should give him that time. But that's just a simple everyday example that could have happened any day, could have happened any Sunday, a real life scenario.
Yeah. Can you describe some of the feelings? I'm reading the book that you recommended, Tony, the Untangling Emotions.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. Can you identify some of the feelings that you have, maybe in this moment here, or in other tech scenarios that you've been in that haven't gone well?
That's great. I'm glad you brought that up. So again, not to get lost in the weeds, but the premise of the book is that anybody that comes to any problem that you come into contact, whether it's a workplace, at home, a spouse, children, whatever, everybody comes to any given problem with their own baggage. And there's so many emotions tied in with all that stuff. If you're not recognizing that, it's easy to have the conflict kind of take over, right? And you cease to realize that, very few people and very few technicians wake up in the morning and say, how can I completely discourage my worship team this morning? How can I completely frustrate my worship leader? Like,
are you sure, Tony? Are you sure they're not coming up with that? Are you sure they're not doing that?
I'm pretty sure, Kevin.
Okay. All right.
Very rarely is that the case. Often people are coming with baggage just, of their own. And in the same way, as worship leaders and as musicians, we're coming with our own baggage. And if we don't realize that, then it's easy to have conflict, right? And oftentimes it's easy for us to say, listen, I'm handling my business, you handle yours, right? Isn't that the attitude that we kind of get into? Like, you're not the only one with problems, I got problems too, and I'm handling it, so why aren't you? And that's not helpful all the time when somebody's in a problem like that. So, the first step, and James is really good at this, and we talk about this a lot. The first step is understanding why there's a problem, like what's happening. Is it something that we're able to talk about, or do we need to schedule it for after the work is done? And asking questions instead of assuming is always the best path forward in relationships. Because we're good at assuming that we know the person, he's probably just doing this again. But as you know, if any of you are married, doesn't always work well with interpersonal relationships. If you assign motive and blame right off the bat without asking, what's happening. So, that's one factor, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let me ask this. The whole quarantine and online transition that's happened that, probably has touched each of your churches in different ways, and you had different preparation for it. And I'm curious to hear from you guys. What are some of the things that have come up in those moments in terms of, not necessarily like a technical issue that you're trying to solve? We can talk about that later, but what has happened relationally, and what has it been like navigating the craziness with your tech people? This is free for all.
So I'd like to say that it actually brought out some of the best in our people in terms of really just rising to the situation and being flexible. We have a whole group of people who are, I'm old enough to be their mom, of course, and we have actually gone from we're meeting to suddenly we're on Zoom to we're meeting in our backyard to we may be trying to get back into the building this weekend, which we share with a church that isn't following any of the protocols, and we're following all of them, and it's just crazy. And we're using a 20-year-old mixer and a, I don't know, 30-year-old Nady in the backyard, and trying to get online in different formats, and they are just making it happen. So I'm saying, this is what I would like, and they are just making it happen. And the only real conflict has been with my son, because I'm his mom, and he's my son, and he's exactly what you were describing, Tony. And he's like, everything has to be perfect. And I'm like, it just has to happen. If the sound cuts out in the middle of worship, we just keep going. Please don't try to fix it, but he's got to fix it. He can't get help, that kind of thing. And we've worked through it. I have just been amazed and blessed at their willingness to just make the impossible happen.
That's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah. It's something Tony often says, is that, week in and week out, sound techs serve heroically with what's usually far less than ideal equipment, room, the whole, every aspect of what makes the sound person's job difficult, they're heroically serving, so that's so good to hear. Somebody else? There maybe not.
You should start calling on people like class.
Yeah.
Put them on. Is that too forward?
I just want to call on Macy Love again.
Hi everyone.
Yeah, let's hear what Macy has to say.
Yeah, I need some tech people to help me change my name on this Zoom call immediately. I think I was thinking about what you were saying. Yeah, I know. I think what you were saying, Tony, is really true, and it's interesting because I always think no one notices the sound person until something goes wrong, and everything has to be perfect really every week. Like everyone's expecting perfection from the sound. Because if a mic squeals or something, anything happens, everyone looks to the booth, and it's a big thing. So the pressure's on them probably more than anybody else, because people could do a little flub while preaching or miss a note in the worship band, but if the microphone squeals and everyone in the place grabs their ears in pain or something like that, or the worship leader can't hear themselves, then it becomes a big thing. So I think that the mistakes, or I should say, the accidents that happen in the sound realm are really noticeable, and the pressure, I think, is more intense than maybe anybody might experience on a Sunday morning, because one mess up is going to be noticed by everyone as opposed to hitting a wrong note on the bass or something like that. The other thing that's been interesting during this time has been people have been way more appreciative of the sound crew and what they bring to the equation. The sort of they're the backbone, which musicians often know that, but not all. I don't know if pastors are aware of it all the time. I think they look at that as just another area of service. But if you are involved in music in any way, you realize that the sound technicians and the people that do that work are vital to the cause of every meeting, every live stream, every worship service. So what's cool is that as other professions have been appreciated in the outside world, like doctors and nurses and frontline people, it's cool to see that sound people and technicians are getting more appreciation from the leadership. I know the band usually gives them love, but from the leadership itself of the church, and the church recognizing, wow, these guys are really the heroes of the church during this time, being able to put together the internet stuff, put together the sound stuff, and really a lot of it is learning on the fly. So I think it's cool that they're getting more love, and people are going to probably show more appreciation going forward. I think one of the main thing is they forget, hey, the sound guy's back there, the sound girl's back there, and they're working hard, and nobody thanks them, and nobody stops by to say, hey, what you did today was amazing. And I think that's important for anyone's psyche as they're ministering and giving up their time and volunteering and all that stuff. So I salute them all. I think it's great.
That's cool.
That's great. Anyone else want to chime in, or I'm going to ask Tony another question.
Huh. Well, that's an interesting question that I don't really, believe it or not, I don't think about that too much, because I'm usually so zeroed in on trying to train audio people in how to talk to worship leaders, because often that's the breakdown, and really it's understanding and being able to empathize with others and understand that there is a lot of pressure on sound people. That's true, but equally there's a ton of pressure on worship leaders. And really, the sound technicians, their main goal is that things sound right and that there's no feedback. There's certainly more details with that, but that it's very, very focused on that. Now, if you're at a smaller church and your sound person is also your video person and also your, word person and all that, then right off the bat, you just need to completely rethink that, because there's too much at play for them to double up on that stuff. So that's a whole other thing. But all that to say is, technical people are very, focused on what they're doing. Worship leaders, on the other hand, they're trying to think of, is this key right? How is the Spirit leading this morning? Where should I be going?
What is the drummer doing?
What is the drummer doing? What's happening in my quiet time? So they're multitasking to a level that they shouldn't be, because multitasking is, I don't care what anybody says, it's not good. All right. So your kids can tell you how awesome multitasking is. It's just not true. All right. If your mind is split, you're not doing well at something. And worship leaders are forced to do that all the time and handle all the interpersonal stuff. So often I'm communicating with the sound team as, you need to realize what they're dealing with and don't add extra things that don't need to be solved. Like, keep it simple and solve problems. Because good technical people, that's what they do. They solve problems. They make the bad stuff go away. And if you're that person, you will always be successful, and people will always want you. When I go into a scenario, people enjoy me not because I'm a great guy, but because I solve problems and I don't add to their, I take away stuff off their shoulders, not add stuff, right? And that's part of the excitement. The other thing that's important to recognize, and again, I'm telling tech people this all the time, is that on any given Sunday on stage, you have hundreds, thousands of hours and thousands of dollars of time invested in musicians who have taken lessons, rehearsed, spent years trying to master their instrument, right? In the average church, if you look at the sound crew and ask how much time they spent in preparation that week or in their life, that's kind of sad, right? Because where are they going to go for lessons, right? They don't offer sound team lessons at the store, at the local music store. So if your church hasn't invested in support and training for these guys and girls, they're starting from a deficit. Unless they're coming out of a career in that, which is challenging in itself, if they're used to working with professionals and then working with, church musicians who are a mixed bag of professionals, amateurs, in the middle, and all points. So that's just something that, needs to be recognized. Not all sound personnel are experienced. And so they have to do a lot of earning of respect. So it's really cool that Mark and Deborah have stories of how their sound technicians and tech people have risen to the occasion and have tried to establish that respect level with your team so that you're like, man, these guys are helpful, and I need them to survive. Not everybody's in that environment because they're dealing with tech people that are just not prepared. They're a step up from being a sound janitor.
Tony, can I just ask a quick question? I don't know if I'm allowed.
Sure.
I get what you're saying about respecting the sound person, and while I definitely have a good relationship with my sound guys, you had mentioned about the church needs to be providing the training, and if we're looking at it in the same light as a musician who needs to be putting in the time and the hours, how would you recommend for churches to provide the training and the resources, when especially probably monetary is being the biggest hurdle there, but also considering time and other things, just resources. Most churches don't pay for their musicians to take lessons, and they're not, holding their hand while they're practicing their instrument at home. They're kind of setting an expectation of saying, look, you need to be responsible as a musician to come prepared. But at the same time, wanting to respect the sound guys, but, certainly there needs to be a level towards the sound guys as well to say, look, you need to have that same kind of expectation to prepare yourself and train yourself, not just putting it on the church's shoulders to say, we have to do all of that work. I'm not sure if you have any recommendations on, resources or something.
Great questions. Yeah. I mean, obviously I'm biased. I think everybody should hire us to come do training, because I just love doing it. So that would be the easy answer. The other thing is, you covered a lot of ground there. We tend to spend money on what we value, right? And the reality is some churches don't value their sound people and having tech people that know what they're talking about. So they've never even considered whether they should invest in training or not, because they never even knew it was an issue, right? But you got guitar players that are spending $5,000 on guitars, and, Starship Enterprise pedal boards and all that stuff. And yet the investment.
Cover the Kemper. Cover the Kemper. Come on, James.
Yes, there you go. So, it's, it's not a problem for them to think about investing, in that. Drummers, if there's any drummers in the room, drummers spend a ridiculous amount on equipment, thousands of dollars. So, yes, there is a cost, but if, it's amazing people's ability to tolerate problems that could be easily solved. And that's a problem, I've been in scenarios before with churches where, you get in and the guitar player, his pickup doesn't work. And, every time he strums, it crackles and does everything, right? Oh yeah, well, he's had that problem for, the last 5 years. Seriously? And nobody thought to fix it? Like, so there you're faced with a problem in that scenario. So you've got a guitar player that doesn't fix his gear, all right? Is it because he truly can't? I mean, is he just heroically trying to serve his family and make a living, and he's working, 15-hour days and trying to keep his head above water? Well, in that case, man, spend $100 out of the budget and fix the dude's guitar, right? Is it really that big of a deal? Like, why tolerate a problem for 10 years that you could fix with $100? Especially when you're playing like a $5,000 guitar, help a brother out, and we don't think about that because we think, well, there's a precedent there, and if we fix his, then we got to do everybody. Well, maybe, but I think if we're truly caring for the people in our congregation, and if we care enough to be excellent at what we're doing and worshiping a God who defined excellence and created an excellence, then I think the stakes are a little higher. And I think that we could probably stretch a little further than what we are. Now, to dictate that to every scenario out there wouldn't be appropriate for me to, it's easy for me to say, right? Yeah. I'm like the training guy. I fix problems. But that's what I do at my church. And that's what I've done in 15 years. If you got a bad cable and you keep buying cheap cables because you don't like to buy cheap cables or buy good cables, by golly, I'm going to buy you a cable because I'm so tired of dealing with that problem, right? Solve the problems, And if that same guitar player that can't fix his guitar, if he can't fix his guitar because he's too busy dropping money into his Harley, then maybe it's time to have just a gracious, humble conversation like, hey, we're expecting a level of excellence. And is there a reason why you're not fixing stuff?
Yeah.
Is there a problem that we can help you with? Or is it just because it's a challenge for you to see how long you can get away with having a bad guitar?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things there, but.
Yeah, I really like the question because it forces the idea, or at least the conversation of responsibility, of making the most with what you bring to the table. It might be from a financial perspective, it might be more of a comparison, say, hey, listen, we send the worship leader to the National Worship Leader Conference, if we invest in that person, in their leadership, and and we might send the whole team to those things, or to a local worship thing, a training, and that is certainly great and appropriate on several different levels. That might be closer to saying, hey, listen, you need to have several sessions with of training for your techs in your room with your gear, because that's going to be what they need versus going to a conference and getting wowed by their latest gear. So, but the question is really good because it forces the question, who's going to solve this problem, or whose problem is it to solve this problem? Because it's a
Right.
problem. Not a lack of knowledge is not good. So, James, you were going to say something.
I mean, just kind of piggybacking. I really like the question. I feel like we're going around the question, but I think that there's some truth to be said for just having the conversation begins to answer a question that people didn't know could be answered. So a lot of places when we work with stuff, they'll say, oh, well, here's what we were told we needed, as far as like, we have this X board and we're going to get one that's $20,000 more to fix our issues. A lot of people they can raise money to budget for that, but they don't put the same money into the people, and you shouldn't put $20,000 into your sound. That's not what I meant. But they'll spend money on expensive gear, but the idea of maybe we could work with what we had if we knew how to run what we had, because a $20,000 board is just more technical problems you don't know how to solve if you already don't know how to work what you have. And there's that reality of where do you go to fix these issues? The question is, I think if you have the conversation in the first place, you may find out that person feels either overwhelmed or doesn't feel overwhelmed. So that's a separate, if things aren't good, but they feel like they're good, then that's another conversation. If there's a whole bunch of different stuff that comes. So I think from looking for the solution is a step past where we need to start. So if the question is,
right,
okay, where do I put the money into to fix this? I think the question is, let's have a conversation, and the beauty of working with coaching for us is that every situation is different and everybody has their own X, Y, and Z's of how they got to where they are and what they need best to move forward to be whatever they do best. Because no one's, you go to a conference, like Dave said, and you kind of adapt this, oh, that's what they're doing mindset. I have to do that. And, Adlib coaching is great, but I'm sure there are plenty of resources. I mean, as musicians, you can send people to certain websites for instrumental tutorials and things like that. There's audio companies that have workshops, master classes, online stuff. So I think having the conversation of where do you feel like you don't feel prepared or you don't feel equipped opens the door to, okay, he said or she said this, let's look into ways we can put money into these things to helping that person, whether it's a training course or something like that. But it's the money in the person goes way further than the money. And that's true for anything. Yeah. I'm sure there's a lot of instrumental, on the chat right now, you'd rather spend money on lessons than you would just buying an expensive instrument you don't know how to play.
Yeah. Well, let's pick that even deeper for a second, because I think it's really interesting. The conversation is that might happen is, hey, how can you fix it? You're not a good sound guy. Now, obviously that's not the words you used. How can we make our mixes?
Say that.
Perfect wording?
No, worst wording I think you've ever had with anything ever. Yeah, I'll go with that.
How do you help people figure out that they have a problem, that they're not good at their role? Because this is back to what you said, Tony, at the beginning. Some problems are technical. That's not a technical problem. That's a pastoral problem, and it's a cultural problem. This is where we want to go. And if you're the leader giving oversight to this direction, how do we want to get there? What do we do?
Yeah, man, that's a great question, and not easy to answer. Obviously, again, that's one thing that it sounds arrogant to say that we excel in, with Adlib, but because we're a third party and we have no emotional attachment, we're able to come in and just ask questions and not make assumptions and just say, well, help me understand what your struggle is. And sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes we don't have that relationship with technical people or other people in our church where we have the freedom to say, hey, let's talk. What's going on? Is it me? Did I, treat you badly at some point? But really digging into, what the problem is, and see it as data instead of personal, with the personal emotional baggage that we bring to it.
Yeah.
So that's a factor.
And that's something that we can do as people in those roles, like, when we are emotionally invested, when there's history, when this person is always, I mean, it took me 18 months to get the keys to the sound desk at one of my worship pastor jobs, right? Like, I've had those moments, but like how we can, if that's why when my go-to answer was like, get to know each other. You got to get to know each other. They have to understand you. You have to understand them. If that's not working, then nothing will, especially when there's problems. And when you see things like, hey man, you're not bringing enough to what I want. You're not bringing enough energy. You just show up, you flip it on, and sit back. I need to know. And you said this, James. People wanting to feel equipped. Like, I'm sure there's an area when you come to that to your role in serving, there's probably something that you feel like not quite well equipped in, or you have questions about, or you wish you felt more confident in. Trying to use language that elicits some of the feeling. I'm just curious, like what, like, and for me it's this, and you can share what it is for you in your role to kind of open that conversation. But then it's like, what is that for you? Because we keep saying this. I keep assuming that I know that you're just a slacker and that you don't care. And as long as I have that in my head, it's never going to work. Even if they are a slacker and they don't care, well, somewhere they care. For some reason, they're in that role, and they've stuck in that role. Like, I just need to get in there and like get curiouser than I have been, and understand more about like what's driving them, what's motivating them.
Yeah, I mean, a large part of that is, just reminding ourselves that, if we believe the gospel and if we believe what the Bible says, then we're going to be spending eternity with these people. So
that way you just got Kevin. That's awesome.
Oh man.
So it behooves us to, to get to know them here on earth, and to develop a relationship where, like, I care enough to ask you and try and understand what's going on instead of just trying to get away from you. And that's not easy. That's not, I mean, that's hard. And not everybody's open to that relationship, and that's understandable. But if we're not starting there, then, difficult.
Yeah. James,
So Tony,
Mm-hmm.
are you trying to ruin my day, or are you just saying what you think?
I do not have the ability to ruin people's day, Kevin.
Okay. Well, I think sometimes our conversation about this stuff goes, it's so, it's generic to the point where, like, I'm thinking about my guy, and I have a particular struggle with my sound guy. And it's not just that we don't get along. We don't not get along. We just don't have a relationship. So there's that. But there is the other element of it that we disagree about what should be happening. And so because he's the sound guy and I'm not, he's kind of like, his attitude seems to be, look, this is my job. You do your job, I'll do my job. And so if we disagree, I have the final say because I'm the sound guy. And like, for instance, something simple like I would say, could you turn me up a little bit in the monitor? I absolutely cannot hear myself. Or could you turn the other stuff down because I cannot hear my vocal? And he would not even necessarily nod in affirmation that he would do that, but he might look down at the iPad, and then he might or might not change anything, and then that's where we would be. And I know there's probably some something that I should be doing differently, but I don't know what it is.
Everybody unmute your mics and say, "Aww."
Sorry.
Well, you
Poor
know,
me.
yeah, that's challenging. And my first step, and it's a harsh reality, but the first step for me is whether the person cares or not. So I don't go to town to tell people which knob to turn. I often start with just figuring out why they don't want to turn the knob, right? That's more important. And we have to recognize that not everybody is cut out to play on the worship team or to be on the sound crew. Like, and there's something that says that you can't release people from responsibilities. And I just don't believe that. I believe that you set a standard. This is what we're looking at for sound people and worship team members. And you have to actually be able to play the guitar and follow the songs. And you have to be able to turn things up and down and balance things appropriately and whatever, blah, 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 blah. If you're not willing to do that stuff, then this isn't the place for you to serve. There's plenty of places to serve in the church. This just isn't it. Yeah. And so that sounds really harsh. Like, oh my goodness, are you firing me? Are you kicking me off? Well, no, but are you disqualifying yourself from being able to serve in this capacity? Because it is serving, and serving is being able to, you know, do something for the good of the team and to follow where the leader has determined.
I might be able to help you over here.
So if you can't do that, then one of you has to leave.
And I can't get it in there. So.
There you go.
You know?
All
right. Is that your sound guy?
No.
Oh, I thought he was, yeah.
Got a package.
Oh, nice.
Amazon.
Yeah,
okay,
so, you know, if somebody isn't willing to care or get along or do the work that's involved to make it happen, then somebody needs to not be doing it.
Yeah.
So do you find do you believe that the worship leader has the ultimate authority on what the sound is going to be?
Who's in charge?
Or that's kind of I think that's where the heart of the matter is with this, because for instance, the electar needs to be super loud, and I just don't want that to be there like that. And so he just does his own thing after I request him to not do that. So
right.
Am I in charge or is he in charge? Maybe that's a question for someone else. Like,
well, that depends on the structure of the church and where it falls. If the worship leader, if the sound team falls under the leadership of the worship leader, then absolutely. And if he doesn't like the way, because it's not, and this is what we all need to realize, it's not just about our preference. I like this. It's about where is our church body going and where do we feel called? And if this is where we feel called, then if you don't like that, then you know, you serve someplace else or go to another church. I'm not saying that to be mean or aggressive. That's just, to me, that seems simple. You know, like if I'm going someplace and everything that they like is what I don't like, then we're just probably not, you know, very evenly yoked. And that doesn't mean that they're idiots or jerks or whatever, but I do sound in a lot of churches that aren't my church. And I don't go to their church for a reason. But when I do sound there, it's the best darn sound I can do at that moment, because that's what I'm there to do. Yeah. Right? And there's a ton of things for me, you know, it's not worth getting into, but I personally don't like loops. I think it's a bad idea. And I have a list of about 30 reasons that make sense to me why loops are a bad idea. But I guarantee you,
Tony's channel here.
I guarantee you, if I go to a church and they're a loop heavy church and that's what they do, I'm going to mix the best darn loops that I can do at that time, because that's what I'm called to do. It doesn't matter if I like it or not. Now, granted, I came out of the professional world where I was touring, and, you know, bands could hire me and they could fire me. And I made more money when they hired me than when they fired me. So to me, it was like, this is what you want? You're the boss. Okay, whatever. So then when I went back to church, I was like, oh, worship leader, that's what you want? All right, well, you know, I don't necessarily agree with that, but, you know, I'll mix my own stuff on my own time, but now I'm working for you. You're not paying me, but, you know, the gospel and humility demand that I, you know, that I serve in that way, because God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. So God forbid that I'm the proud and I get opposed. That's a bit of a fear of mine. So I say, okay, Lord, this is what I do. If your sound person doesn't have the ability to do that, then it becomes less of a technical issue and more of a pastoral issue. And there you need a third party. You need to escalate to the next guy in charge. If that's the administrator, the pastor, whatever. And if you still can't handle it after that, then one of you has to go.
Well,
and that sounds bold, but
I want to say, well, no, that's appropriate. But I want to say two things. One is from a leadership and authority perspective. Like, I love the line that my leaders have said to me on different occasions. Look, this isn't like necessarily the right way. Thus saith the Lord. It's in the scripture here. Look at this. It's just the way that we've decided to do that. And my question for you is, can you honor that? So from a leadership hierarchical, if that's the approach that you use, that is very appropriate, it feels like. But before I ever go there, I feel like those are even the wrong questions to ask, because Kevin, you said that it feels like you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, and, you know, whatever. That's a way of looking at things that's different than the way I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it as we are frying an egg together. I'm cracking it, maybe I'm seasoning it, you're flipping it. We are making this egg together. And it is vital that we know if we want it over medium, over hard, over light, or scrambled. Like, we have to see the same finished egg laid out on that plate with the home fries and toast and scrapple. Well done. Sorry, I just went somewhere else. We have to know what is that egg supposed to be like, because if you've ever fried an egg, and I like mine over medium, like the yolks are still runny, but the whites are cooked. That's the way I like them, salt and pepper. And how many times have I flipped the egg that I thought was perfect, and then I broke it? I'm like, this egg feels like it's literally ruined. I should just throw it to the dog because the yolk popped. That's how it feels, right? I have a lot of passion for eggs, for over medium eggs. Or if I cook them too long and the yolk gets hard, I hate them. They're just gross. But you're doing that process, that intricate process together. You have to talk about this and use whatever language that's dividing you into saying, well, that's not how I see it. I see this as a real delicate partnership, and we have to be hearing the same thing. And on some level, if it goes there, then it's like, well, listen, I know you don't see it that way. I'm in charge. Like that's like a 19th option for me. You know, I might have to go there, and it's appropriate to go, which is why I started with that. Like, hey, this is what we decided to do. Can you just honor that? But before I get there, I want to spend time making sure that we understand what the nature of our working relationship is. So.
Yeah, Dave, I wanted to remind you, just because we talked about this before, we wanted to keep this to pretty close to 1 hour. We're about 3 minutes away from that, in case you wanted final thoughts or something.
Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do want to say hi to Grant, officially making
hi, Grant.
His hello from New Zealand. So we're officially intercontinental.
How comes I don't have him on my screen? Where is this guy?
He's on the end.
Oh, there he is. All right.
Hello. Making breakfasts for boys and making lunches. Great to check in with you guys. Love you all. Glad you're passionate about worshiping God through songs and doing it better. And I love Dave and Anthony, mainly that's why I'm here. But continue. Bye.
Awesome. Thanks, Grant.
Dave,
Yes.
can I take 2 minutes just before we kind of lead into that?
Okay.
Yeah. Kevin, kind of going with what you were saying and just echoing and bringing it full around to one of the first things that Dave asked. I think the biggest thing is that before any of these serious or more permanent steps are taken, it's starting a conversation about getting to know the other people and what their skin in the game and what their investment in what they're doing is. Because I've worked with a lot of different musicians, and one of the best things is when you have someone and they like I can think of recently a drummer who was like playing and just very heavy and certain types of fills, and I was like, you're playing great, but like it doesn't. And then like we had a conversation later, and he's like, yeah, my favorite band's Metallica, and I was like, everything that ever stuck out of my head was now answered. Like now I know why he's doing it. Now I know what he's going for and like where his influence is. And so when you work with varying degrees of like Tony said, there are professionals, there's semi-professionals, there's, very passionate lifelong hobbyists. And then there's the guy who just picked it up for the first time last week. And unfortunately, but also to our benefit, is the beauty of our congregation, the beauty of our service to God is bringing all of that together to make something that does work. And not just work, but we want it to be, we want to get as close as we possibly can to celebrating the glory of God in that way that we never will make it, but that's like, it's every week, you want to make that experience something that is worthy of a God who's worthy of so much more than we can ever give. Yeah. So when you said at the beginning, how do you as the worship leader talk to them? I think the answer is graciously. I think you need to treat them, even if you disagree, even if you've worked with every level of profession, in this setting, he's the expert for that place. If he's the guy that's been put in charge, then he's the expert. I would never go up to a guitar player that I was leading and go, oh, here's all the things you could do better if he's doing an okay job for the best of where he's at. Even though I play guitar and toured and did all these things, like I'm not going to go take his guitar and be like, here's what you should be doing. That kid or whatever is doing the best that he can in that scenario. So I'm going to try to find out where he can get just a little better, as opposed to point out all the things he's not doing right. And so it's weird, but sometimes when people get that breakdown of like, oh, Kevin thinks that I'm good at doing sound, that's like levels of breaking down the walls of like, if you just come at him and say, well, here's all the things you're not doing that I'm looking for, it's defensive. And we're all protective of something, but I'm sure we all know, or maybe no one's ever had this problem, but sound tend to be more territorial than most people that we work with. But I think that the reason is because their equipment, everybody seems to know how to work their equipment just a little bit. Everyone will walk in, the worship leaders will go, oh, can we do this? Or can we move this? Or can we not? Nobody goes up to very few people go up to the piano that's on stage, the keyboard, and go, here's what you should do, and move all the knobs around. So we're protective of our stuff too. It just doesn't get touched as much. Not as many people think that they have the know how to do it. So I think bringing that person to a point where they feel respected as though they're actually good at what they're doing brings us closer to that middle point where it's like, hey, you are good at what you're doing, but you counting me down. You are good at what you're doing, but here's things that we can do better, or here's things that I need to do my job well. But if he doesn't feel like he's good at what he's doing, I've been in a lot of places where I can see how people interact with the tech team, and I go, well, no wonder. And they're not doing it to be mean. They're just trying to get what they need. But like, you're treating them like a fast food service.
It's good.
Not you, Kevin, particularly.
Yep, good. It's good.
Dave
People
put me down. He was with fingers. I had to wrap it up.
Yeah. So unless anybody has like a burning, hey, Saul, help me solve this problem. And if you do, just wave at me and we'll let you do that. Otherwise, I'll count Kevin's as that, as to solve my problem for today. All right, nobody's waving. So off topic. It doesn't have to be worship related. Doesn't even have to be a question. It could just be a comment. Like, crazy world right now. We're a bunch of worship people in different areas and different places. Anything you want to say, anything you want to ask, any comment, anything that you're noticing, maybe that's hopeful or encouraging, or something that's vexing you that you just don't understand, other than social media and politics?
It's a chatty group, it really is.
Just give them some time. We're sitting around the table drinking coffee.
I just wanted to call attention to prayer. It just seems like on every aspect, there's spiritual warfare going on that we aren't recognizing because there's just so much flying at us. I mean, right down to we meet on Saturdays, not Sundays, and we haven't decided where we're meeting this Saturday. Whether we're meeting in the backyard of my house again, or whether we're moving into the building, and we're trying to call everybody to find out who won't come if it's this way, who won't come if it's that way, where everybody's head is at. We're committed to, we're tiny, so we're committed to full fellowship, and we have people in their 80s and 90s, and we have pregnant people, and it just like once you feel like you've got something else comes in, and the Lord just keeps reminding me that this is warfare. And it just seems like that fundamental thing, that this is warfare. And if we aren't starting acknowledging that, it doesn't matter what any of the other problems are. There's going to be another one right around the corner.
That's good. Thanks, Deborah. I would love if each one of you said something. Not to put pressure on you. You don't have to, but you know.
All right, completely self-indulgent and off topic and all that. I've been watching comedy shows, and I'm looking for a new Netflix show that's funny to escape from the heaviness of life. What would you recommend?
I have two things.
Anything goes. So that's
no. I have two things. One, this is on Facebook yesterday. This is not a show, but go read the reviews on Amazon for the sugar-free gummy bears.
Okay.
Best 10 minutes of your life. Well, hour if you read all of them. Super hilarious. And then just generally, we've loved watching Dry Bar Comedy on YouTube.
Okay.
I don't know if you've watched that at all.
Yeah, it's been a while, but I've watched a few of them. Yeah.
There's a guy named Robert Mack, I think. He's one of my favorite guys. He's just like super dry, super intellectual. He'll say something, and it's not like a super straight face. Never laughs. Just like, I love that guy. He's really funny.
The worship fails are always really funny too. If you go on YouTube and look for worship fails, you'll see like a guitar, falling off a guy's neck, or
They also will give
keyboard
you
crashing
nice.
or something like that. It's kind of makes you feel like you're not alone. Renee is ready to say something, I can tell.
Well, I was trying to think of Netflix recommendations, but I don't have any, so I'm sorry. And I can't think of anything unrelated to bring up, because I feel like you planned this topic for me. It's been a whole conversation this week at church, because we're just getting back into the building, and we're remembering how bad the sound is, because we've been doing it from home for so long. So yeah, Tony, I'll be reaching out. I actually have emailed you before and didn't follow up. So this was a great, just a kick in the pants to get that going, because we have a really, really dedicated sound guy who puts in the hours to learn, but he's just not learning what we need him to. So yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I thought this was great, and I got a lot of good tips from it. So thank you.
Awesome. Great.
That's great. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I don't know most of you, but this has been great to listen to this. I think one encouraging thing for me, my primary discipline related to worship is songwriting. And it's been really encouraging to see the church I go to right now has hired me part-time to do some writing for them, which is a lot and due to all the changes and like space and budgets that's not being used for normal things. They're being creative and like looking to do new things, which was super exciting. I think that's times of chaos. We need new things, but I think a lot of times we don't track what we need and how to make space for it. And so I'm just encouraged when I see that happening. So I think I think there'll be more of that too.
Yeah, that is wild.
That's cool, Jonathan. I don't know you, but I love when I hear that guys are writing for their church instead of just regurgitating a lot of the stuff that's not really that great in the first place. So I hope you're pursuing excellence. I love the thought of Isaac Watts serving his congregation every Sunday by writing a song that was applicable to the message and served that culture and community of people. So, man, God bless you, and don't quit early. Don't settle for cheesy songs.
Well, the project we're doing right now has 102 micro songs, so I've got a ways to go. I'm like, I'm just
wow.
But it's pretty cool. They're using it for like ongoing spiritual education and formation for the whole church. So it's been really neat. We have a lot of really old people, so they're going really slow doing anything together. So
yeah,
great.
That's cool. Well, and Jonathan, he's the guy. This is way back. I looked it up. Is actually fertilizer number 60. So a long way back. But he had this idea of this three-legged stool. Didn't call it that, but three-legged stool of creativity, excellence, and vulnerability. Like you need all three of those. You can go on the website and probably see that. I'm not sure if it's there or not, but you can try it. Where if you have two, but not the third one, there's always something that's missing. If it's not creative, it's not excellent. If it's not vulnerable, there's problems. So there's probably some
I'm about to
really
read that.
Cool
That sounds
music.
cool.
Yeah. I've edited it now. I'm up to number 90 something now of editing all of them. So I'll put it up on the website and give you guys a link to it. So, okay. Anybody else before I close up to honor our time? Awesome. Thank you so much, guys, for joining this. I hope this has been helpful, and I will let you know when the next one is. All right. Cheers to all you
guys.
Thank you so much.
Peace.